It was just after 5 in the evening, but winter had already swallowed the sky. The town of Maplewood felt smaller under snow, quieter, heavier. Streetlights glowed through a thin white veil, their light blurred as flakes drifted down in slow, unhurried spirals. The sidewalks were slick, the air sharp enough to sting the lungs. Most people hurried, shoulders hunched, eager to reach warmth. But Claire Whitmore walked carefully, step by step. Her boots were old, the soles thinning, crunching softly against ice. A faded navy scarf, once a gift, now frayed at the edges, was wrapped tightly around her neck. Her coat was too big, donated years ago, sleeves hanging past her wrists. Damp strands of blonde hair clung to her cheeks, darkened by melting snow. In her arms, bundled in a worn pink blanket, was her 9-month-old daughter, Lily. Lily's breathing was soft and uneven, her tiny fingers peeking out from the blanket like pale petals. Every few steps, Claire adjusted her grip, rocking gently, whispering words meant more for herself than the child. "Almost there, sweetheart," she murmured, her voice barely louder than the wind. There was no car waiting for her, no bus fare tucked into a pocket, no family member to call and say, "Can you help tonight?" Just a mother, a baby, and hope stretched thin against the cold. The automatic doors of Megamart hissed open, releasing a wave of warm air that made Claire's eyes sting. Heat rushed over her face, sudden and almost overwhelming. For a second, she just stood there, blinking, breathing it in. Warmth felt like a luxury these days. She grabbed a cart, wiped melted snow from the handle with her sleeve, and gently settled Lily into the child's seat. She tucked the pink blanket tighter around her daughter's small body, making sure her face was clear. "We're just getting what we need, sweetheart," Claire whispered, forcing a small smile. The store buzzed with ordinary life, carts rattling, scanners beeping, distant conversations about dinner plans and weekend errands. To most people, it was just another stop on the way home. To Claire, it was a calculation. She moved through the aisles with quiet precision. Bread, store brand, oatmeal, discount apples, bruised but still good. Her eyes flicked constantly to the price tags, her mind adding numbers faster than her hands moved. She didn't linger. Lingering led to temptation, and temptation led to disappointment. $23. That was everything she had.
Then she turned into the formula aisle. Her steps slowed. The shelves stretched out before her, rows of cans stacked neatly, labels bright and unforgiving. Her heart dropped into her stomach as her eyes found the familiar tin, the only kind Lily could tolerate. Hypoallergenic, soy-based, doctor recommended. The one that didn't leave her baby crying for hours with rashes and swelling. Claire reached out, her fingers brushing the edge of the can as if touching it too firmly might make it disappear. She looked at the price, $29. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. Her mind raced. Maybe I can put the bread back, the oatmeal, the apples. She did the math again, and again. Even if she put everything back, it wouldn't be enough. Her throat tightened. She imagined Lily later that night, fussing, hungry, her small face scrunching in discomfort. She imagined pacing the apartment floor, whispering apologies to a baby who couldn't understand them. Claire's hand hovered in the air. What if I ask to pay later? What if I leave my name? I'll come back Friday. I always do. Her heart pounded as she lifted the can and placed it gently into the cart anyway, as if that alone might change the outcome. At the checkout, Claire unloaded her items slowly, lining them up with care. Lily stirred, letting out a soft whimper. "It's okay," Claire whispered, brushing her thumb over her daughter's cheek. The cashier, a teenage girl with tired eyes and gum snapping softly between her teeth, rang up the items without looking up. The total appeared on the screen, $83. Claire opened her wallet, crumpled bills, loose coins, everything she had. I only have 23, she said quietly, her voice steady despite the heat creeping up her neck. The cashier didn't respond. She simply reached out, took the can, and slid it away from the counter. The sound was small, but it echoed. Someone in line behind them sighed loudly. Claire's cheeks burned. She didn't look back. She couldn't. She paid for what she could,
barely $11 worth, and pushed the cart away, her shoulders curling inward as if she could make herself smaller, less noticeable. Lily began to fuss, sensing the tension. "It's okay," Claire murmured again, though her voice wavered now. Outside, the snow was falling harder. The bus stop shelter at the edge of the parking lot offered little protection. Claire stood beneath it, rocking Lily gently, her breath visible in the cold air. Her grocery bag felt impossibly light.
Across the store, near the coffee kiosk, someone else had seen everything. Daniel Rhodes stood beside his cart, one gloved hand resting on the handle. 37, tall, composed, dressed in a dark overcoat that fit perfectly, the kind that suggested boardrooms and long meetings. His life, from the outside, looked organized, successful, untouchable. Beside him, seated in the cart, his 5-year-old daughter Isla swung her legs, sipping apple juice through a straw. Daniel hadn't planned on watching, but once he noticed the woman, he couldn't look away. He had seen the careful choices, the hesitation, the way she touched the formula can like it mattered more than anything else in the store. He had seen the cashier slide it away. He had heard the sigh. Isla tugged gently on his coat. "Daddy, what's she doing?" The question landed heavier than it should have. Daniel didn't answer right away. 4 years. 4 years since Emily had passed. 4 years of structure, schedules, and spreadsheets. He had learned how to function again, how to provide, how to protect, how to make sure Isla never lacked for anything. But something else had gone quiet inside him. Something softer. Now watching a stranger hold herself together in the middle of a grocery store, he felt it stir. "Daddy, why's she sad?" Isla asked, her voice earnest, unfiltered. Daniel looked down at his daughter, then toward the doors where the woman had disappeared into the snow. "Yes," he said finally, his voice low but certain. He turned the cart back toward the aisles. This wasn't impulse, it was recognition. Daniel stopped in the formula aisle, standing exactly where Claire had stood minutes earlier. The same can sat untouched on the shelf. He picked it up without hesitation. Then he noticed a rack of fleece-lined mittens. He added a pair. Warm food from the hot counter, soft rolls from the bakery. Not because it would look generous, but because it felt right. Outside, the cold hit instantly. Daniel scanned the parking lot and spotted her near the bus stop, rocking her baby against the wind. He walked toward her, Isla tucked close under his arm. "Excuse me," he said softly. Claire turned, startled, instinctively holding Lily closer. Daniel held out the paper bag. "I think you might have missed this." Confusion flickered across Claire's face. "No," she said quickly. He didn't pull the bag back. "It's okay." Her jaw tightened. "It's not for me." Daniel met her eyes. "It's not charity," he said gently. Claire hesitated. Snow gathered silently on their coats. "So you..." Something shifted. Before Claire could speak, Isla peeked out and smiled. She said brightly. Claire's lips trembled. She looked at the little girl, then down at her baby, then back at the man holding the bag. Slowly, with shaking hands, she reached out. "Thank you," she whispered. And in that moment, in a snow-covered parking lot, 2 lives brushed against each other, quietly, without knowing how much would change. The heater in Daniel's SUV hummed quietly as he pulled out of the parking lot. Snowflakes streaked past the windshield, blurring into white lines under the headlights. Inside the car, warmth slowly returned to fingers and toes that had gone numb outside. Claire sat stiffly in the passenger seat, Lily cradled against her chest, the brown paper bag resting between her knees like something fragile. She hadn't loosened her grip on it since they'd stepped inside. For a long moment, no one spoke. Daniel kept his eyes on the road, hands steady on the wheel. Isla, dropped into her booster seat in the back, had gone quiet, her apple juice forgotten as she watched the baby with sleepy curiosity. Claire finally broke the silence. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly, not accusing, just honest. Daniel nodded, as if he'd expected the words. She glanced at him, surprised. Most people insisted, explained, justified. He didn't. The streetlights passed in slow rhythm, casting light and shadow across his face. Claire noticed the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the tiredness there. Not exhaustion, but something older, Something settled. "I'm Claire," she said, "and thank you." "Daniel," he replied. "Hi," Isla said, waving. "I'm 5. Claire smiled despite herself. Isla beamed. They drove in silence again, but it felt different now, less heavy. Lily shifted in Claire's arms, then relaxed, her breathing evening out as the warmth reached her. Claire stared out the window, watching the town slide by. She wasn't used to sitting in a car like this, clean, quiet, safe. The last time she'd ridden in one had been months ago, a coworker's ride after a late shift that no longer existed. "Maple and 5th, she said eventually. Daniel nodded and turned onto the street. The neighborhood was older, the houses closer together. Some storefronts were shuttered for winter, their windows dark. Snow piled along the sidewalks, untouched. He parked in the narrow lot beside a low brick building. Claire hesitated before opening the door. "I know it's not much," she said, her voice almost apologetic, "but it's warm." Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. Inside, the stairwell smelled faintly of cleaning solution and something floral beneath it. The walls were chipped, paint peeling in places, but clean. Claire led the way up the stairs, balancing Lily in the bag with practiced ease. Apartment 3B. She fumbled with her keys, then laughed softly, embarrassed. "Sorry." Daniel shifted Isla to his other arm. The door opened into a small but tidy space. A single lamp cast a warm yellow glow across the room. Second-hand furniture was arranged with care. A couch patched with a handmade quilt sat against one wall. A low shelf held children's books and bins of toys made from household scraps. Paper towel tunnels, yarn-strung puppets, bottle cap cars. It wasn't fancy, but it was intentional. Claire slipped off Lily's coat and laid her gently on a blanket on the rug. Lily kicked her feet, delighted, grabbing at the air. Isla slid down and crouched beside her. "She's tiny," she whispered, like it was a secret. Lily squealed. The sound filled the room. Claire froze for half a second, then smiled. She hadn't realized how quiet it had been before.
"They like each other," she said softly. "Looks like it," Daniel replied. He noticed the photograph above the couch then. Black and white, a young soldier in uniform, helmet tucked under one arm, eyes steady. "Who is he?" he asked. Claire followed his gaze. "My grandfather, Thomas Whitmore." Daniel nodded slowly. "He must have been." "He was," she said. She moved into the kitchenette, unpacking the bag Daniel had given her. When she pulled out the formula can, her hands paused. She swallowed hard. "I don't know how to repay you," she said quietly, her back to him. Daniel shook his head. "It's okay." She turned. "People always say that." Daniel met her eyes. Isla had fallen asleep in the car, her head heavy against his shoulder, her breathing slow and even. He'd carried her upstairs, tucked her beneath the quilt Emily had sewn years ago, kissed her forehead. She hadn't stirred. Now the quiet pressed in around him. Daniel poured a glass of water, took a sip, then set it down untouched. His mind kept drifting back, to the small apartment, the patched quilt, the way Claire had held herself like someone used to bracing against the world, and to the photograph on her wall. Thomas Whitmore. The name tugged at something very deep in memory. Daniel walked down the hallway to the closet at the end, the one he rarely opened. He reached up to the top shelf and pulled down a cedar box, its surface worn smooth with age. The hinges creaked softly as he opened it. Inside were fragments of another life. Old photographs, medals, a folded flag, and a bundle of letters tied together with green string. Daniel lowered himself into the armchair near the window, the city lights glowing faintly through the snow outside. He untied the string slowly, his fingers careful, almost reverent. One letter slipped free. He recognized the handwriting immediately, his father's. The paper was yellowed, creased from being unfolded and refolded over the years. Daniel smoothed it gently and began to read. August 3rd, 2004. The convoy hit an IED outside Mosul. I woke up under twisted metal, bleeding, pinned. I thought it was the end. Then someone pulled me out. A young soldier, blonde hair, sharp eyes, strong as hell. He dragged me clear and stayed until the medics came. His name was Sergeant Thomas Whitmore. I owe him my life. If I don't make it back, tell Daniel about him. Tell him there are men who risk everything for someone they barely know, and we never forget those men. Daniel's breath caught. He stared at the name.
Thomas Whitmore. Slowly, he reached back into the envelope and pulled out the photograph tucked inside. A young soldier stood beside a military vehicle, helmet under his arm, eyes steady, expression calm but resolute. Daniel's heart began to pound. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his photos until he found the picture he'd taken earlier that evening, an absent-minded shot of Claire's living room, the children laughing in the foreground. There it was, the same face, the same eyes, the same name. Her grandfather. Daniel leaned back in the chair, stunned, the letter trembling slightly in his hand.
Time seemed to fold in on itself.
Decades ago, a man he had never met had dragged his father out from beneath burning wreckage. Now he had stood in that man's granddaughter's home, accepted cocoa from her hands, watched his daughter laugh beside hers, and she hadn't said a word. Perhaps she didn't know, or perhaps she didn't need to. Daniel closed his eyes, letting the weight of it settle. "This isn't coincidence," he murmured softly. He stared at the flickering streetlight outside, memories overlapping, his father's stories, Emily's quiet strength, Isla's innocent question in the store. "Can we help them?" Daniel straightened. "I won't repay this with money," he said aloud, voice firm. "Not charity, not pity. Legacy." The next morning, Claire woke to Lily's soft babbling and the pale light of dawn filtering through the thin curtains. She stretched carefully, listening for the familiar ache in her shoulders, but something felt lighter. She fed Lily using the new formula, watching closely for signs of discomfort that never came. Lily drank eagerly, then smiled, milk-drunk and content. Claire laughed, a sound that surprised even her. Later that afternoon, her phone rang. She nearly ignored it. Most calls these days were wrong numbers or reminders she couldn't act on, but something made her answer. "Claire?" a woman asked. "Yes." "Hi, Claire. My name is Janet. I'm calling from the Maplewood Veteran Support and Outreach Center." Claire sat down hard on the edge of the couch. "Yes," she said, heart racing. "We'd like to invite you in for a conversation," Janet continued warmly. "There's been a new development." Claire swallowed. "Yes," Janet said. After the call ended, Claire stared at the phone in her hands. For the first time in months, the future cracked open. The next day, Claire walked into the outreach center with careful steps, Lily left with a neighbor. The building was modest but welcoming, flags lining the entrance, photographs of service members on the walls. Janet greeted her with a smile. "We recently received funding for a new initiative," Janet explained as they sat. Claire's heart skipped. "It was established to honor Sergeant Thomas Whitmore," Janet continued. Claire felt the room tilt. "He was my grandfather," she whispered. Janet nodded. Claire's hands trembled as she listened. A paid position. Training. Support to return to college if she chose. A path forward. She walked out into the cold sunlight afterwards, stunned, tears freezing on her lashes as she smiled.
Somewhere, somehow, her grandfather's life still mattered. Daniel watched from a distance as the foundation began its work, careful to remain unseen, his role anonymous. This wasn't about recognition. It was about honoring a man who had once chosen courage over safety, and a woman who, without knowing it, carried that courage forward every day. But not everyone watching saw it that way. In a corner of a polished office downtown, Veronica Ashford watched the grant announcement scroll across her screen. Her expression tightened, eyes narrowing slightly. She knew Daniel. She knew his patterns. And something about this didn't sit right. The seeds of doubt had been planted. The hall was full long before the ceremony began. Rows of folding chairs stretched across the community center, every seat taken. Flags lined the walls. Framed photographs of service members, young faces, old faces, all steady, watched quietly from their places. At the front, a banner hung above the stage. The Whitmore Grant, honoring service, building futures. Claire stood near the side entrance, Lily balanced on her hip, a folded speech clutched tightly in her hand. Her heart beat so loudly she was sure others could hear it. She had almost declined the invitation. Public speaking wasn't fear, it was exposure. Standing in front of strangers meant being seen. And for most of her life, Claire had learned that being seen often came with judgment. But this wasn't about her. It was about her grandfather.
For him, she whispered, kissing Lily's temple. Lily babbled in response, tugging gently at Claire's collar, blissfully unaware of the weight in the room. Then Claire saw him. Daniel stood near the front row, tall, composed, dressed in a dark tailored suit that looked out of place in a room built for folding chairs and coffee urns. Beside him stood Isla, her curls neatly brushed, a pale yellow dress falling just below her knees. Isla spotted Claire instantly. "Here you are," she shouted, breaking free and running across the room. Claire barely had time to react before Isla wrapped her arms around both her and the baby. "I missed you," Isla said proudly.
Across the room, another pair of eyes observed the scene. Veronica Ashford stood near the back, posture perfect, expression unreadable. Executive Vice President, impeccable reputation, known for precision, strategy, and control. She had known Daniel for years, respected him, admired him, perhaps even hoped. And now she watched him smile at a woman in a borrowed dress holding a baby that wasn't his. Something tightened in her chest.
When Claire's name was announced, the room hushed. She walked toward the stage, Lily in her arms, the speech paper trembling slightly. The microphone seemed too tall, the lights too bright. She took a breath. "I never imagined I'd be standing here," she began, voice wavering before steadying. Murmurs rippled softly through the audience. "He raised me after my parents passed. He taught me that strength isn't loud, it's quiet." Claire glanced toward the front row, her eyes finding Daniel's, not in recognition, but in gratitude. "This grant didn't just give me resources," she continued. She paused. The applause that followed was warm, genuine, full. But as the ceremony continued, whispers began to spread. "Funny how the first recipient knows the donor." The words were never loud. They didn't need to be. By the time the chairs were folded and the lights dimmed, doubt had settled into the corners of the room. And Veronica Ashford knew exactly how to use it. 2 days later, the conference room at the Maplewood Veterans Support and Outreach Center felt colder than usual. Board members sat in a half circle, folders neatly aligned, coffee cups steamed, untouched. Claire sat at the far end, hands clasped in her lap, trying to slow her breathing. Across from her sat Veronica. The words were polite. The implication was not. "There have been concerns," Veronica continued, "about the relationship between the anonymous donor and Miss Whitmore." Claire felt heat rush to her face. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, a chair scraped back. Daniel stood. No suit this time, no tie, just a charcoal sweater, sleeves rolled, posture relaxed but unyielding. He placed a folder on the table and opened it. Inside was an old letter. "My father wrote this in 2004, Daniel continued. He was trapped under a burning vehicle after an attack in Iraq. A soldier pulled him out." Daniel slid the letter toward the board chair. The room stilled. "I didn't know who Claire was when I helped her in that store," Daniel said. "I didn't know her name. I didn't know her history." Claire looked up at him, stunned. "I learned the connection later," Daniel continued. He paused. "Claire didn't ask for this. She didn't manipulate anything." Claire stood slowly, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "My grandfather didn't save a man to secure my future," she said quietly. "He did it because it was right." Silence filled the room. Then the board chair spoke.
She turned to Veronica. Veronica said nothing. She simply gathered her things and left. Daniel met Claire's eyes across the table. For the first time, she didn't feel like she had to justify her place. She already belonged. 2 years passed quietly, not with fireworks or headlines, but with mornings that mattered. Sunlight poured through the kitchen windows of the small house on Willow Lane, painting golden rectangles across the wooden floor. The air smelled faintly of coffee and pancakes. Outside, laughter floated in through the open back door. 2 little girls chased each other through the grass, their giggles rising and falling like birdsong. "Isla!" called, her curls bouncing as she ran. Lily, now sturdy on her feet, turned with a triumphant grin and held up something squirming in her tiny hands. "Tutu," she announced proudly. Isla shrieked and laughed at the same time. On the stove, Claire flipped a pancake with practiced ease, her robe tied loosely around her waist, hair twisted into a messy bun. A pencil rested behind one ear. Her phone buzzed on the counter.
She glanced at it. Whitmore Grant Foundation, board agenda finalized. She smiled. Executive Director. Some days the title still felt unreal. 2 years ago, she had stood at a checkout counter counting coins. Now she spent her days helping families navigate the same systems that once felt impossible to her. Scholarships, childcare support, job training, one grant at a time, one life at a time. She hadn't forgotten where she came from. She never would. Daniel walked in from the backyard, breath slightly quick from his morning run, wearing joggers and a plain white t-shirt. He leaned in, kissed Claire's cheek, and stole a pancake from the plate. "You have a meeting in an hour," he said casually. "I know," she replied, swatting his arm. He grinned. From outside, Isla's voice rang out. "Mommy Claire!" Claire froze for half a second. "Mommy Claire." Isla had said it for the first time months ago, without thinking, without hesitation. Claire had cried in the bathroom afterward, hands over her mouth, shaking with gratitude. She stepped onto the porch just as Daniel handed juice boxes to the girls. "Mommy!" Daniel still felt that word land in his chest every time. Not heavy, healing. That afternoon, they walked through the park together, their favorite ritual. Leaves rustled overhead, sunlight filtering through branches in soft sheets. Claire held Lily's hand. Daniel held Isla's.
Halfway down the path, Isla looked up at Claire, suddenly thoughtful. "I wish you were my mommy when I was little," she said. Claire's throat tightened. She knelt down, meeting Isla's eyes. Isla smiled, wide and sure. Claire pulled her into a hug, tears bright in her eyes. Daniel stepped closer, resting a hand at Claire's back as she rose. "They needed you," he said quietly. Claire leaned into him. They stood there for a moment, 2 children in front of them, hands linked, the past behind them, the future open and unafraid. Years earlier, a lonely CFO had noticed a woman returning formula. What he did next wasn't charity, it was recognition. Recognition that dignity matters, that kindness echoes, that the smallest choice can ripple across generations. A soldier once pulled a stranger from fire. A mother refused to give up. A little girl asked a simple question in a grocery store. And a family was built, not from obligation, not from rescue, but from love freely chosen. If this story reminded you that kindness still exists, that quiet courage can change everything, then share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more soul-stirring stories. And never underestimate the power of one human moment.